I'm Mike.
I'm Jason.
This is Snake Envy. So we mentioned last week, Brumation's over. You've been feeding everybody. How did feedings go last week and this week so far? I know you're still in the middle of feeding this week, but
I only fed a handful of breeders last week just because it was only 3 or 4 days after.
yeah,
It was only 4 days after I brought them out, so it's a little early to try to feed them. The ones I did feed, I fed, they were smaller snakes. I fed them fuzzies. They're milk snakes, and they all attacked them pretty quickly.
very good. So this week we're going to talk a little bit about the fact that one of the themes on our channel is always there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's lots of good ways to get very good results. And there is really, I'm sure if we thought long and hard enough, we could come up with something that we agree you don't mess with. But for the most part, there's nothing in the hobby that is you must do it this way. There's always multiple ways to get good results. But it's easy on the pet owner side, but on the breeding side, people might be surprised to know not everybody does everything the same way. So we're going to talk about 3 or 4 things that you do that might vary a little bit from what other breeders are doing, or that might deviate a little from the norm, or maybe yours is the norm and there's a lot of other people doing it different. But I think it's helpful for people, particularly for people that are just getting into breeding, to know that there's options.
Oh, yeah.
So let's start with, you're just coming out of brumation. So let's start with, how long do you brumate? People have different opinions.
Yeah, a standard's 3 months. For most people, go 3 months. I like to go 4 months. We've talked about this multiple times, but I feel like I get a better fertility rate out of 4 months. I feel like it jumps it up, 5 or 10%. I tend to get better results with that. One thing I wanted to mention too is when I got into this hobby, there was not internet.
Right.
Not until a few years, 97.
Not until you were into it for a ways.
But I got into it in 95, and there wasn't a lot of information on breeding. And it was, people didn't share stuff. It was just herping. People don't want to share their secrets. And but there was a book, and King Snake Milk Snake book by Ron Markell, and they went over a bunch how to do it and stuff like that. And it was super scary. Don't let your egg, if your egg varies a degree within a minute, your snake's dead.
Right.
Or something like that. It was pretty dramatic, but it's come to find out they're way tougher than all that. You can get away with a lot.
I often say, nature is not perfect. And things happen in nature that you can't predict. And here where we live at a decent altitude, we're just under a mile high here, but we've got the foothills and mountains nearby. We can have freak storms in the middle of summer where it might dip into the 60s.
Well, it just happened. Today it happened. I was outside in a t-shirt, and then half an hour later, I'm grabbing a coat because it's snowing.
It looks like it's going to snow out there right now, and it was raining earlier in the day. So, granted, snakes are typically laying their eggs underground, and that's going to help to offset. It's an insulator, but nonetheless, you can't count on it, And so it's hard to believe that in the wild, everything goes as perfectly as maybe people think it does.
So that book, just was really
it had you terrified.
I really don't do anything that book says, but but it was a good guideline.
Yeah, it got you started.
And what it did is it gave me a foundation, and then I kind of, through my own trials and error, figured out which worked better.
Yeah.
Or worse,
Yeah, and you had a couple of great mentors too, who you could learn from directly, and you've got some people now that you mentor a little bit. So, mentors are always a fantastic thing.
Yeah.
So, topic number 2 you've got everybody out of brumation. Now, how long before you start introducing it? And I know some of it has to do with species variance, but again, not everybody is on the same timeline.
Yeah. There is a big species variance in colubrids. I have snakes that go as early as start like week 3, and then I have some that start like week 9, 10
Yeah.
for breeding. So that's, that's quite a difference. A lot of people in the books even like, when to introduce and stuff like that. And a lot of this stuff I learned on my own too, which species I had to learn on my own, which species do which and when and all that. But the book would say, when your female sheds around week 4, you then introduce it to the male, which is, it works great. Like when they do shed, they do ovulate, females usually will start ovulating. I don't do that, and sometimes I'll do it if it's kind of
if it's in your wheelhouse already.
Yeah. But generally I go by time lengths. Like, so week 4, I'll put these together. Week 8, I put these together. And so that's kind of how I do it.
Okay.
Some people wait till sheds, and then I've had people email me or message me and say, it's been 8 weeks since she hasn't shed, and it's been 8 weeks. And it's just like, well, you better hurry and just throw it together, because you're going to miss a window.
There's
right
a
there.
chance now you miss.
You could miss a window.
So that's another example of where nature should work a certain way, but it doesn't always.
Yeah.
And who knows why.
And I'm not saying my ways are right, or it's just what works for me. Like,
you've learned over time and I'm betting over the years waiting for sheds, you ended up having a female not successfully breed.
I've missed ovulations
because you missed the ovulation waiting for her to shed. So that's the beauty of having 27 years of experience, is you've learned along the way, and now the book kind of goes out the window and you've got your own book. All right. So now everybody has laid. What are you doing with the eggs? This is another area where a lot of breeders are very specific. They use incubators. The incubators obviously maintain an exact temperature for the entire time of the growing cycle. What's the official word for that? The gestation.
Yeah.
For the entire gestation, everything's in an exact temperature. It's all carefully monitored. You do not do that. Tell everyone what you do. And we've shown it, and we'll show it again as we
talked about it a bunch. But yeah, so a lot, like 82 is the book standard again. For most colubrids. I like to go cooler than that. And I personally feel like, well, Mother Nature's not perfect, and you think it's 82 outside every day in the wild. It's, it's not. But the ground is an insulator, I like to go cooler. I shoot for 78, but I like my temperatures in this room fluctuate.
Correct.
And sometimes dramatically, and that's why I use the coolers. The cooler is just a barrier to keep it from dramatically fluctuating.
The cooler acts like a burrow in the wild. It's an insulator, and we're just talking about big coolers you would take camping. Yeah. The beautiful thing about those coolers too is you take snakes to expos in those coolers. I use those things all the time. Those things are triple purpose, because you're using them all the time. We've driven, all the way to Portland, Oregon from here with snakes and coolers.
And the thing that's good about it is you're in a car and, the temperature's going to fluctuate. What if you got the sun beaming down through the windows, Yep. It just keeps it from a drastic fluctuation.
Now, part of your strategy, part of what you have told me about wanting to shoot for a little cooler temperature, is that naturally that means your gestation period is longer.
Yes.
So tell everybody the difference between like an incubator gestation period versus yours, and then why do you think yours is beneficial?
Okay. Yeah, most people go 82, like I said, and it's consistent. I feel like
And for how many weeks?
it's generally,
I mean, you let the snake decide once they start pipping and all that, but
Yeah.
typically how long in an incubator?
in the incubator. I used to hatch stuff from 8 weeks to anywhere from 8 weeks to 9 weeks. At my cooler temperatures, I'm looking at 10 weeks for,
Okay.
and this is my theory and this is my thoughts. And I think it's healthy to have some fluctuation in temperatures. I think that can help on sex ratios.
Interesting.
A lot of
because-
people don't believe that.
No, because kind of the urban, I don't want to say myth because there is some truth to temperature
Certain species, certain things,
and
yes.
sex with certain species, but kind of the urban legend is, oh my gosh, if that temperature's off by this or that, you're going to have all females or you're going to have all males, and you're saying that the ratios actually work out really well with just a cooler temperature
Yep.
but a longer period.
In my experiences,
Yes.
it's worked out better. Another thing is, I think letting them go longer, I think it's healthier. And what I mean is like, I think they develop a little slower, which I think is better for, it feels like they absorb the egg yolk better. And I feel like growing, like that's a dramatic change in an egg, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I feel like you're rushing that process. Like I just don't feel like it's healthy. I don't have any evidence towards that, but I
Just your experience.
just my
Yeah.
my feeling on it.
So, in addition to your fertility rates being a little higher, you've learned over time, you also feel like your survivability rates and the health of those neos is better. And you've kind of learned over time. And yes, you haven't taken the time to, do controlled studies.
I'm a hobbyist. I'm not a scientist.
You're a professional, but you're not
Yeah.
interested in writing a scientific paper about
Yeah.
this stuff.
So
The results are working. Everything's working the way you want, so you stick with it. All right. Last topic. This is another one that is often vigorously debated
yes.
on social media. All right. That first snake in a clutch pips. And maybe for beginners who don't know, that's when you see that first slit in an egg where the snake is working itself out of the egg. So the egg is now slit. There are people who believe once that first one pips, cut them all, get them out. You take a different approach.
I do cut them too.
Occasionally.
I cut them, but I don't cut everyone. Like it depends too on the
Yeah.
clutch of what it is or how the eggs are positioned. There's a few factors.
Yeah, what I've noticed is you'll go through, and if you see an egg on top of an egg, or you see something like that, and maybe you've got a bottom egg kind of buried in the substrate, and then you got an egg on top of it on a weird angle, you'll cut that. And that's just to make sure that a snake finds his way out.
Because when you get eggs stacked on
Yeah.
each other and they're stuck there, you can't take them apart.
Yeah.
But like what if that egg tooth is cutting through its egg and then there's an egg on top of it?
Right.
Like it's not gonna get to where it needs to go.
Right. Or it ends up going into substrate.
Yeah. So
Gets
sometimes
confused and
like that, I think it's a good case to cut them.
But as a general rule, you wait, and maybe if you've got a straggler or two that are days behind everybody else, you might cut. But you're not a believer in cut them all at the first pip.
Right. Yeah. And occasionally I do. It's just like I said, but there's all kinds of theories like with that.
Yeah.
Like is this good or bad? And I've heard both sides, and just an interesting thought was if we're cutting eggs generation. Is that harming the snake's development in making an egg tooth? Possibly. I don't know.
They'll de-evolve to
A little bit, yeah.
not have
It's
to
like-
get themselves out of the eggs.
I mean, I don't know if that's what would happen.
Who knows? But generation, over many, many years, who
It's
knows?
a fun topic.
It is, yeah. I mean, there are people out there who think rattlesnakes are evolving not to rattle in the wild because they've learned generation after generation after generation that rattling often gets them killed,
Yeah, well, with humans.
particularly by people. So what's meant to scare off predators is actually leading to their death in some instances. So some people theorize rattlesnakes aren't rattling as much. So when it comes to an evolutionary process, who knows? Who knows? Now, there's also theories that if the snake goes too long, it drowns in the egg.
Mm-hmm.
It's run out of nutrition, and essentially you've cut it off from being able to get to the outside. So, they essentially suffocate in the egg. And the other theory, and I think there's some credibility to this as well, based on your experiences, is maybe that extra few days means a little more egg taken in. And, maybe a little more development. Maybe the baby comes out just a touch stronger.
And I think a lot of people cut eggs because they want to maximize their dollars, and
They're impatient.
that's fine. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Get them out and get them on the market, get them fed.
you want to make sure that
Yeah.
none die, and I have
Yeah.
I have stuff die in the egg every year. It just
Yeah.
there's that's a dark side of the hobby, is dealing with death and
Yeah. Natural mortality.
animals failing to thrive, and that stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah. There's always neos even after they hatch. Everything's good. And even in some cases they've eaten, but they just die. And in many cases, we never know why. We lose animals to old age. You lost an animal to old age this week. So that's going to affect your breeding plans this year.
yep, it sure does.
But
change
you're
things.
already prepared for it. You're always prepared for it because you've always got holdbacks. But kind of a bummer when what you thought would be a pairing this year may now have to wait a couple years while a holdback gets old enough.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's always that side of it that people, the hobbyists like me just never see to a large extent. All right, so fantastic. So like, subscribe, comment. What are you doing as a breeder that maybe other people think you're a little crazy for doing? Or what are you doing that you feel like is so by the book that you've never felt the need to change it? Thank you.
Thanks.